So here's the process I've come up with for bringing CAD geometry from a parametric modeling software like SolidWorks or Onshape or Fusion 360 into Blender with good topology that's ready to take textures and make beautiful renderings from. So first thing I'm going to do is open up a software called FreeCAD and create a new document here. And I'm going to go into the part workspace. Now before importing my step file, I'm going to go into Preferences and into Import Export, and under the Step tab, make sure that Enable Step Compound Merge is turned off. That allows us to import a step model with multiple part bodies, which we'll need for this model that I'm going to be importing. All right, so File, Import. All right, well, this is a step version of the original CAD file, so the one that would be sent off to a factory for tooling and has all the details like fillets and little logo on it. So in order to make this work well in Blender, what I've done is gone back into the native CAD package this was made in, which was SolidWorks, and I've gotten rid of all the fillets and like surface details like logos, trying to make each part body more of a primitive, so it's a little easier for quad remesh to chew on. So we'll import the step file of my simplified model. And if we take a look at it here and toggle between the two, that's the simplified one. So you can see it's lost all of its fillets, doesn't have a logo, and the parts are just like a little bit more geometrically simplified. So we're just going to focus on a single one of these part bodies. We open this up. You can see there's 23 parts in this model. We'll work on this one here. So I'm going to hide everything else. All right, so this is the part body that we're going to be importing into Blender. So first thing you want to do is right-click on the part body and go to Set Colors. Now this allows you to select individual faces and change their color. So grab this one, change it to bright green. And what you want to do here is make sure no adjacent faces are the same color. So like this face and this face need to be different colors. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to change this whole face. On my Mac here, it's Command click to select multiple faces at once. All right, so right here, I've noticed that there's some kind of detail that I didn't end up getting rid of in the original CAD package, this little hole that a screw goes into. So I'm just going to forget about it for now and let the mesher kind of run over it and see what happens. We can always rebuild this in Blender later, so it's not too big of a deal, especially because it's on the inside of the part. So. All right, now we are ready to export an OBJ file from FreeCAD in order to bring it into Blender. All right, we're going to go into our Mesh Design workspace, and we're going to click on our part body and go to Meshes, Create Mesh from Shape. Now here we want to choose the standard option, and I'm going to do 5-degree deviation. Angular deviation is sort of the change in surface angle, like on the front curve of this part. The angle of change at which it adds another vertice, another mesh. So we want it to be pretty fine so that quad remesh in Blender has a lot to kind of chew on and understand about the surface. The other important thing you want to click here is Apply Face Colors to Mesh. All right, so I'm going to hide the original part body. And now we have this mesh that has the face colors we assigned to the various portions of the mesh that correspond to those faces on the part body. I'm going to right click on the mesh and export mesh. We're going to choose OBJ. We'll call this front housing. All right, and something else I'm going to do here is export a mesh of the original part body from the original CAD model for this, so we can use it as a reference in Blender on how to execute our fillets and keep them as accurate as possible to the original model. So now we're going to hop into Blender, delete our cube here, and then we're going to import, file import OBJ. Grab the OBJ file. I think it's Y up in FreeCAD, or however your model is oriented. You want to make sure it's the same here. So it's easy to work on. And here we are. We have the mesh, and the different colored faces here correspond to different materials. So if we open up the Materials tab, we can see there's a few different materials in here that are the colors of the meshes. And that's really going to help Quad Remesh to understand the geometry and build nice topology over it. So with this OBJ, we're going to open up this little drawer by pressing N, and then go to Quad Remesh. Now the settings I've been using here, I'm going to turn off Adapt Quad Count. I'm going to use 5,000 quads. That's worked well for me. I'm going to turn off Detect Hard Edges by Angle and turn on Use Materials. Now Use Materials is going to allow Quad Remesh to understand where the hard edges are going to be, because none of our adjacent faces have the same material. And that's really that kind of hand holding has really created the best meshes that I've been able to generate. And then symmetry. Now symmetry is a little buggy in Quad Remesh. We do want symmetry. As you can see, it's symmetrical along in the Y direction here, but if I click Y, it doesn't always work how you would hope. So if it doesn't work, we'll just try it again. No big deal. And then we are ready to go. So I'm going to remesh it. Takes a second. Oh, it looks like that was the wrong direction of symmetry. Let's try X. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Nope. Well, there's only one other dimension. And for some reason, Z was the way to go, even though Z is up and down. Makes no sense. So if we zoom in on this and we look at the mesh, it looks a little puffy and weird. That's because Shade Smooth was on, so we're going to shade flat, and then press Tab to go into Edit mode and check out our topology. Not bad. So you can see it captured the outside surface pretty nicely here. Got good, accurate edges for us to work with. Got this little alignment tab. Pretty nice. This is the inside of the mesh, so this kind of stretchiness probably isn't going to matter with our texture. And if we look at our little problem area here, it actually created this hole. All right, a little bit of gunk at the bottom, but we can clean that up. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, since this is a symmetrical model, there's no need for us to edit it twice, one for this side, one for this side. So I'm going to turn on X-ray up here, and I'm going to select all of the faces on one half of the model. It looks like I was a little sloppy with my selection, so try that again. All right, so that looks like I got it. There's some funkiness, and I can actually press C and then Shift and deselect anything kind of as a selection paintbrush. and then right click, and it gets me out of that mode. And I'm going to hit X to delete them and delete these faces. So now we have half of the model. And I'm going to apply in Modifiers tab over here a mirror modifier. And we want to mirror in the Z direction for some reason. So now when we edit anything over here, it's going to mirror that change on the other side. And what we'll do, turn X-ray off and just kind of cruise around the model looking for strange geometry that's a little unsightly. So I'll grab some of these points, figure out what's going on here. This doesn't really matter because it's on the inside of the geometry. It's not something that's, I guess unless you're doing an exploded animation or something, it's not something you'll really see. But I'll fix it either way. It's good enough. Turn on this guy and go in here. Look at this rat's nest at the bottom of this little hole. And we're just going to get rid of all this. All right, just to better work on this, I'm going to turn this the visibility of this mirror modifier off so I can see the half of the hole here that we want to close up. I actually don't really even like the geometry down here, so I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to turn on the magnet here to vertex, and I'm going to use that to extrude this point over here, and then turn on edge selection. I'm just going to cap the bottom of this thing. All right, good enough. So I think that's all the gunk I could find in this part. So next, I'm going to turn the mirror modifier back on, or turn its visibility back on. So what I'm going to do now is open up that OBJ file from the original CAD and bring it in here to reference this model against and re-execute the fillets in Blender to keep our topology clean. So import OBJ. So imported in the same coordinates as our original model. And here it is. So now we can see the fillets, and then again, this is, dirty mesh from an OBJ export, but it'll work as a reference for what we need to be filleting and what we should do here. So before we do anything, I'm going to take this retopologized model here, Shift D to duplicate it, and right click to not change its position. And I'm going to hide the other one, the original one here, and we're going to work on this duplicate. So if we make any destructive changes, we don't have to worry about not having geometry to go back to. So I'm going to, real quickly, to make things easier to look at, go into the Materials tab. In Edit mode, press A to select all, and assign everything to this white material. Now, zoom in here. And we're going to add a fillet. If we look at our original model here, there's a fillet along this edge, same radius around here in the front, and then all the way down and around the bottom of this edge. So we're going to add that bevel. So I'm going to select that edge loop with Alt-click, select Shift select both, and Shift select this third. So now we have this loop, that loop, and the one all the way down around the bottom. I'm going to add a bevel. All right. Now open up the bevel preferences here, and hit 1, see where we're at. We're going to use two segments so that it creates a little bit of a rounded surface. And that's looking pretty good to me. Just double check it before I commit. All right, that looks great. And then we can add a bevel around the inside of this if we want, like there was on the original part. All right. Now, if this is a physically manufactured part, it's going to have a very small bevel on all of these edges. No edge is perfectly sharp in the real world. So we'll add that to this inside edge. Select these edge loops. And I find it works best to start with the larger bevels first. They're kind of displacing more geometry, and then bevel these smaller edges later. All right. So we want a very, very small bevel here, like, yeah, just enough to make it realistic. All right. So now if we set shade smooth here, we can start to see that this is looking pretty realistic. We can add a subsurface modifier to further smooth out the surface, and got a pretty nice looking model. We'll compare it to the original. Not a lot of change when you flip back and forth. Pretty accurate. Good enough for a rendering. Alright, so now I am going to apply this mirror modifier so we can work on this part as a whole again. And what we're going to do now is mark our seams for UV unwrapping, so we can apply texture to this model. So when you're thinking about where to put your seams, you want to think about what direction you're going to be looking at the part and what's going to be hidden. So this is going to be the main visible outside surface, including maybe some of this geometry up here. So I'm going to place the seams kind of up underneath this and on the inside edge of this, this part coming down and around. So we'll Alt-click that, Alt-Shift-click, Alt-Shift-click, make sure we're getting our seams. I think we've got it all for this one. Yep. So right-click, we're going to mark seam. Looking good. So now we'll go to our UV editor here, select all, hit U, and unwrap. And we've got two nice clean UV islands here to apply textures to. Go into our shader editor here, and I'm going to add an image texture so we can really see what's going on. All right, so I changed my lighting so we can see what we're doing here. And we can take a look at this texture. And it's a, it's a very strange rope texture, but you can see how it's wrapping around the mesh. Looking good. Move our light up here. You can see that the texture wraps pretty cleanly around the edge and the top of this mesh. Turn our subdivision surface modifier back on. And yeah, pretty clean. And thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions.